Hey guys, it's Kevin again. This is going to be another classic movie review for you guys. Now, this classic movie review, this is one of those rare cases where this is a movie that I've already seen, and I don't do this a lot, but I figured I should for a couple of reasons. One, because I really wanted to do a classic movie review, and I didn't have time to watch a movie because I want to watch two, and the second one I want to watch is actually very long, and I want to start my 4th of July movies as well, so and there's like 5 of them and they're not short, so um but I decided I review this film because because last year I did it with 3 films, Forrest Gump, E.T., and the last one I did was Back to the Future. And I figured, okay, I did Back to the Future 1, so I have to review Back to the Future 2 and 3, which I never got around to, and I figured I finally should, so that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to review Back to the Future Part 2 and Part 3, not in the same video, but back-to-back, because one, these films were actually shot back-to-back when they came out, and, plus, I want to finish the series and, talk about it and get everything over with, so let's just get into it. This is, for the 1989 comedy, science fiction, classic Back to the Future Part 2. Now, Back to the Future Part 2 was actually very interesting. When the movie first came out, they didn't want a sequel. When Back to the Future came out, the whole thing with them at the end with, Doc in the flying car, that was supposed to be a joke, with the end, that was a joke, and because the movie was so well received, though, they made a second one, and immediately after they made a third one because they wanted to conclude the series as best as possible, and problem was this was made actually years later, and while the first one was 1985, this was 1989, so a lot of changes had to be made. And with all that said, what do I think of Back to the Future Part 2? I still love this movie. I do. I love Back to the Future Part 2. There are some things I like about it more than the first one, honestly, and I'll get to that. For a while, it was my favorite of the franchise. It's not now, because I realize, Back to the Future is the best one, obviously. But Back to the Future Part 2 is still a great movie. I think it's a little bit underrated. A lot of people don't give it the credit that it's worth, and I think that, honestly, there's a lot of stuff that we should thank it for today, and, yeah, let's just get into the plot of this movie, because the plot of this movie is awesome. I love the plot of Back to the Future Part 2. Basically, as we know, at the end of the first movie, Doc told Marty and Jennifer that they have to go back to 2015, yes, this year, 2015, to basically prevent, Marty's son from ending up in jail, so that's exactly what they do. However, while they are in 2015, this allows Biff to steal Doc's time machine and travel to 1965, where basically he alters history by making his younger self wealthy and essentially creating an alternate 1985. They basically have to stop him and, basically fix things to the way things were, and that basically is the plot of Back to the Future Part 2, and I love the plot of this movie. So, let me get into some things that makes this movie so great. I mean, first of all, the acting. The acting is just great in this movie. Really, it is. I just think that everyone really is fantastic again. Michael J. Fox, I mean, he's just as fantastic. He's great in this role as Marty McFly. He's so natural. I don't think he'll ever play a role as good as Marty McFly. Honestly, I don't think he ever will. The only role I could think of that was as good as Marty McFly is Alex P. Keaton from Family Ties. And the only reason I know about that show is because my mom's shown it to me. That's really the only reason. Nothing compared to Marty McFly. Marty's just this awesome kid. We all want to be Marty McFly. Seriously, you see this kid, we all want to be him. We all want to be able to go in this time machine and, basically do things and alter time and things like that. I mean, it's such a cool concept. I think Michael J. Fox just pulls it off so well. He actually played a triple role in this movie. Not only does he play Marty McFly, but he also plays Marty's future son, Marty Jr., and his future daughter, Marlene McFly, which I thought he did a really great job with. And definitely he was really funny with that. And then, of course, you have Christopher Lloyd as Doc Brown, which obviously he is fantastic in this movie. I mean, Doc Brown, he's the guy with the time machine. And the thing is, they get a lot more of him in this movie because they actually time travel together rather than, just Marty, and it actually makes the movie a lot stronger. I really love their dynamic. I think the way they work together is great, and I just really love that about the movie. Honestly, they work fantastic together, and their bonding is still one of the best parts of the movie by far. Thomas F. Wilson as Biff is so menacing. He does a great job as this menacing villain. He also plays his son Griff, but I think Biff is just such a menacing villain, honestly. I mean, he doesn't really get that menacing till he becomes this rich tycoon, and then he makes the entire town just everyone loves Biff, and it's pretty crazy what he does. But I mean, the first one he was a bully, but here he is a straight up villain, and I think he does a fantastic job. He's so menacing, you don't want to mess with him, and I think he did a great job in that role. Really, he did. Lea Thompson is back as Lorraine. She's always great in this role. Honestly, she's fantastic. They had to change the role of Jennifer. Originally, she was played by, let me just get to it, who originally played her. Um, she's now played by Elizabeth Shue, but she used to be played by, let me see. She used to be played by Claudia Wells, but they changed her because I guess she didn't want to come back, or just, I don't know why, she didn't come back for whatever reason. But Elizabeth Shue does play Jennifer, and I think she does a really good job, honestly. You don't really notice a difference. Honestly, I didn't notice a difference at all. I think she still does a really good job. She's still the Jennifer that we love. I think it was cool that they expanded her role in this movie, and I definitely really enjoyed her character in this movie. She was still great, really. She was still very funny, and they have this great joke where basically there's this great scene, of course, where basically they put her in this coma because they don't want her to know anything about the future because she doesn't understand like time travel and things like that. But then she wakes up and she's basically in her future home, and if she meets her future self, she's gonna like pass out, and that's exactly what happens. Her future self comes in contact with her present self, and it's hilarious. It's as funny as you can think, and I think Elizabeth Shue did a great job. She didn't have much to do, and it wasn't like she had big shoes to fill, honestly. Jennifer was a huge part of the series, but it wasn't like she had really big shoes to fill, and I think she still did a great job in the role, really, she did. James Tolkien is just great as Mr. Strickland, so funny. Slacker, Marty McFly, you're a slacker, and it's so funny the way he does that. Jeffrey Wiseman replaced Crispin Glover as George McFly. I don't know why he replaced him. Crispin Glover was great, but he's good as George, I guess, and then, of course, Flea as Needles is also really good. So everyone's really great in this movie. I think all the acting, for the most part, was great, and everyone does a really good job. The directing by Robert Zemeckis, I think, is better than the first one. Honestly, the directing's better here because of what he had to do. I mean, think of how this movie's a lot more complex than the first one. You know, the first one was just 1985, go back to the 50s. It wasn't that complex. This movie's a lot more complex because we start in 2015. We then have to go to, we then go to the alternate 1985, and then we have to go back to the 50s, and the way that Robert Zemeckis directed all that I thought was great. You know, the way he really put an influence into 2015. I mean, he made 2015 look nothing like it does today. Obviously, they didn't know what it was going to look like. But one of my favorite gags is, like, Jaws. I think it's, like, Jaws 30 or something. It's hilarious with, like, it just making fun of how many Jawses there were. Just little gags like that were great. Of course, hoverboards. They actually did make hoverboards, which is awesome. I think it's really cool they actually made a hoverboard. Those shoes that just, like, tie themselves. Why do we not have that? Seriously. That's something I love in this movie. Just the gadgets that they invented in 2015. It's one of the best parts. The way that there's, of course, the thing that just the TV turns on by itself. You just wear the glasses and you tell it to turn it on by itself. One of my favorite parts by far is the microwave, when basically Jennifer gets home, she puts the little thing into the microwave and it turns big like a microwavable dinner. That was hilarious. I love that gag, and just the stuff that Robert Zemeckis did was great. It's a lot funnier than the first one as well. Like, the first one's really funny, but this one's, at first it's really funny, then it's actually very dark, but I think he did a great job with that. And just also, the twists and turns this movie take is great, and by far his directing was great. The screenplay of this movie is fantastic, though, because this movie has so many twists and turns. It's really a non-stop thrill ride. While I think the first one is relatively fun and just a fun movie, this is a non-stop thrill ride, and I think Bob Gale did a great job doing the screenplay. You never know what direction this movie's going to take, and I definitely really love that, especially after Biff, gets the time machine. You don't really know where the movie's going, and the way the screenplay was handled, I definitely really love that. The movie's hilarious as well. There are so many quotable lines to this movie, and I absolutely love that. Definitely, I think the lines are just great to this movie, and also just the setting, of course, is great, and just everything about the movie. The screenplay is just fantastic, really it is. Cinematography as well is just fantastic. Honestly, it's amazing how good the cinematography is in this movie, because they didn't have computer effects yet. They didn't, and the way they did the cinematography was fantastic. I don't know if it was practical or what they did, but I think they did really good with the cinematography. I definitely really enjoyed it, and that's something I thought was really well done with the cinematography. I mean, you definitely love the cinematography in these movies, and that's one of the things that you notice, just how good the cinematography is. Really, you do. The score, I mean, Back to the Future is one of the best scores of all time. Like, you just hear those first few notes and it gets you hyped. Seriously, it's one of those intros where it gets you more and more hyped, and that's one of the things I love with these movies, is just how hyped the score gets you. And it's just the score and it gets you so hyped, and that's awesome. The editing as well to this movie is just great. It never feels, it's not too long at all. It's, I believe shorter than the first one. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. I believe it's shorter than the first one. Actually, let me check that. Is it shorter than the first one? Because I believe it is. Hour 56. Oh, no, this one. Yeah, it is shorter than the first one. The first one was longer. This is shorter than the first one, and I like that. I think it actually is the shortest of the franchise, which is fine that it's as long as it is, because it needs to be as long as it is, definitely, to tell the story that it doesn't need to be as long as the first one, but I definitely really do think it's fine that it's as short as it is, and I think definitely it did a good job with the editing. And, yeah, so overall, now we get into spoilers for Back to the Future Part 2. I'm sure you guys know the spoilers for this movie. But if you guys haven't seen Back to the Future Part 2, please see it. It's just as good as the first one. I don't think it gets the credit that it does deserve, and I think it's still a great movie. So, by far, the cliffhanger in this movie is by far one of my favorite cliffhangers. I think probably my favorite cliffhanger of the series, honestly. The way they end things in this movie, it's just horrible, honestly. It ends horrible for them. I mean, basically, Doc has to hover above in the time machine as the thunderstorm's approaching, and Marty basically has to burn the almanac on the ground and undoes Biff's damage to history. But of course, the time machine is struck by lightning, so who knows if they can get back, and basically they're stuck there now. And then, of course, there's that letter that Doc writes Marty, and we find out that he was sent back to 1885, and now we know, okay, we're going to go back to 1885 here. So he races back into town, and there's, of course, the 1955 Doc who, of course, had just helped Marty from his first time travel incident to go back to 1985, and of course he's shocked by Marty's appearance, and just the way that ends, I thought was perfect. I loved the ending of the movie. I think that was really well done. Something else I loved was the way they incorporated the 1950s into this movie. The way they did that was definitely very well done, because, they'd have the scene from the 1950s and then add something into it here. That was definitely something I really enjoyed. Ultra 1985 is just, that's a world that you don't want to live in at all. Obviously, it's this crazy world. Doc has gone to an insane asylum. Biff has forced Marty's mother to marry him. I mean, George was killed in 1973. It's this whole world you don't want. It's probably the worst world you can have in this series, and that's something I think is very well done, how bad they made the world, and I definitely really do enjoy that. But overall, guys, I really do love Back to the Future Part 2. I think it's still a great movie. It's just as good as the first one, in my opinion. I don't think it gets, as I said, the credit it deserves. It really should. But basically, that's my review Back to the Future Part 2. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know if you guys saw this movie you have seen. I will see you guys in my next video, which will be for Part 3, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.